bought their wheat last year, bought their lambs, we were able to get those sold and buy all support. Those sales held up very well. So I was happy about that. The challenge, of course, has been how to keep this money deployed in a way that's meaningful. Some of the programs that came out from the federal government were better suited for cattle and maybe for crops than what we were able to do. But I think our program will be valuable to producers where the whole programs that came out really didn't make a lot of sense. We'll continue to work at it as much as we can. I have talked to our Senator Brasso and also to Congresswoman Cheney, who continue to be hopeful that there might be some certain movement on the CARES Act that would allow us to carry it past the 30th of December and hopefully be a little more practical for these. It certainly would be helpful for our ag sector. We do see an uptick in number of cases. Just when we did our guys the other day, one of our employees was sick, and happily their family, larger family, their dad, and so on, were also kind of laid up with it. And then more recently, we see some others. We're working hard to make sure that we have an appropriate response that doesn't lock our economy down and gets us to the point where a vaccine or something like that Wyoming products are sold. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Governor, and the effort to respect your time. We appreciate it. With all the technical difficulties on this end, it reminds us what kind of a state we live in where we can still work through the technical difficulties and still be able to listen. So thank you. And thank you for answering our question.
Thank you, and thanks to the Farm Bureau. We are in this together, and
Thank you, Governor. All right. That. Thank you, Holly. I know.
Thank you.
Technical difficulties will make you want to pull your hair out, which I've had a few technical difficulties in my life. Fortunately, right now, we have an in-person speaker. Miss Angie Bruce, which is the Deputy Director of the Wyoming Department of Game and Fish. And she's been gracious enough to come in and let us know what's going on in her department. And with that, I will give you the floor, and Holly and I will get out of your way.
Is my okay for you? Oh, wow. Yeah.
You're up close and personal.
Yes, lovely. Okay, well, for a moment there, I thought I was going to have to speak for the governor, and I thought, oh boy, I'm in trouble. But anyway, it's an honor to be here today, and it feels a little bit like going home. And I say that because I grew up on a farm in Southwest Iowa. And as most of you know, entertainment for us was swinging on a barn rope, trying to see between me and my brothers and sisters who could jump the farthest. I spent my weekends halter breaking my sheep, getting them ready for fair. My first vehicle I drove was a tractor. And my first job was walking beans. And that ages me a little bit there. So, but my first exposure to Farm Bureau was in junior high when I was invited to attend a leadership camp in the big city of Des Moines, Iowa. So I'll remember that just like yesterday. Great opportunity. So I've been in Wyoming for about 4 years. And even though I'm not entirely up to speed on all Wyoming issues that deal with fish and wildlife, what I do know and what I have observed over the last 4 years is those values and those conservation ethics that I grew up with on the farm carry over to Wyoming and carry over to Wyoming farmers, landowners, and how most of you refer to each other here that I've learned, ranchers. So anyway, I just like to acknowledge that the Department of Game and Fish highly values landowners. And without you guys, we would not have the longest mule deer migration corridor in the lower 48. We would not have the largest sage-grouse leks left in the world. And we would not have the largest native bighorn sheep herd either. So these are all things that we would not have without landowners. So speaking of migration corridors, one of my favorite subjects, and I'd like to update you a little bit about where we are with migration corridors in this state. The governor did not talk about this in his presentation, but February 13th of this year, our governor signed the first migration corridor executive order for the state of Wyoming. I'm going to talk to you about things that are in it, what this corridor means, and what it doesn't mean. This corridor is the first of its kind because it puts protections on migration corridors. We are a leader in the West. What it does do, it separates out migration corridors into what I like to call two buckets, identified corridors or designated corridors. And it gives us the ability to continue to identify where these animals are moving and simply talk about them as identified. However, there's another layer of protection. When we put that title designated on a corridor, then what that means is those corridors have additional protections when it comes to development. But what this executive order doesn't do is it does not apply to private lands in the state of Wyoming. It asked landowners to voluntarily work with us and keep doing what you're doing for migration corridors. It also doesn't apply a standard stipulation to development, which you might know from Sage Grouse executive order. We know a lot about migration corridors, but we don't know enough to be able to say you can or cannot do this in migration corridors. So if we have a project occurring on federal or state land in a migration corridor, we're going to look at that project individually on a case-by-case basis to see how we can minimize the impact on the corridor. I'm going to jump to elk feed grounds. This mostly involves landowners in Western Wyoming, but it's bigger than that. It's probably one of the most difficult, complex wildlife management issues in the world today. We have people all across the US greatly involved in watching what we do here. It's extremely complex, and if there was an easy answer, we would have already had it figured out. We really don't know what the answer is. And we have started an effort in the state just this week to really dive into the issue. There are 3 federal agencies involved in this: a state agency, Office of State Lands, Department of Ag, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then you have 2 diseases, 2 conflicting diseases with brucellosis and chronic wasting disease. What you do for one might actually cause problems with the other one. You also have conflicting objectives. You have recreational interests, hunting objectives, outfitters who have a stake in this. So many things pulling against each other, all wrapped around this single issue that has been occurring since 1905. So what we have started is, our first effort is to educate folks on the issue and start gathering input. We're going to start some public engagement opportunities December 1st. I believe there's 5 different ones. They now will be virtually. I know that's a lot of fun. In order to have folks start to understand the problem, and this is where I really wanted to bring attention to you guys, because we're going to need landowner involvement and landowner opinion and ideas in this effort as we move forward. At the end of the day, we want to identify a path forward for the elk feed grounds in the state. So please participate in those, and you can also let me know if you want more information as well. Next, I'm going to touch on grizzly bears. Fun, right? I'm going to just hit all the hard subjects. Grizzly bears are recovered in the state of Wyoming, in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They have been recovered for almost 20 years. We have met the population objectives, and we have met them twice because this target continues to move. We pay over $2 million a year in managing grizzlies, their research, conflict management, and damage, for a total of over $50 million to date. We are greatly concerned that we're starting to see grizzlies expand their home range. And with this expansion, we know that you guys, landowners, recreationists, hunters, are starting to see grizzlies in areas that they traditionally have not been used to seeing them, which increases the chances of human safety. We know that these conflicts occur 54% on private land, and 65% of those conflicts involve cattle. We are dedicated to continuing to work on this problem. As you can see, it's very expensive and it takes lots of our time and effort. We have the support of our federal delegation. In September, our Commissioner, Vice President, Pat Crane, testified on a bill by Senator Enzi and Senator Brasso's Committee of Environment and Public Works. This bill was simply put to delist the grizzly bear. So we will continue this effort. To be honest, the last few months, we have pushed the pause button on this subject slightly. And I say that because depending on how the election went, our strategy was going to be quite different. So as we're getting closer to understanding the results of that election, we will pick this back up. We have a group of stakeholders also involved and continue down the path of getting grizzly bears delisted in the state. Now, when I talked about NZ's bill to delist grizzlies, to me it's an indicator. If we have federal legislation proposed for delisting a species, to me that tells me that the Endangered Species Act, as currently is broken, and it needs to be amended. This is another area that we have spent a great deal of time. Governor Gordon recently testified on a bill that Senator Brasso brought forward. This bill was the work of a huge stakeholder involvement from the state of Wyoming to amend the Endangered Species Act. Governor Gordon's testimony was taken quite well. It seemed to be that there was a good understanding that the Endangered Species Act from 47 years ago is not meeting the intent today. But how to exactly fix it, to amend it so that it is effective, is where the disagreement still lies. Again, I bring these issues up to you because I know they're extremely important as landowners in this state, and just know that we continue to work on them. We have great support and understanding with our federal delegation, and we will continue to move forward on these in the coming months. But I'm going to end with a very positive note where I know we can make a difference and where I know we have a solution. Wildlife crossings in the state of Wyoming. 15% of all motor vehicle crashes in the state involve big game wildlife. How many of you in this room have been in an accident by hitting a deer, moose, elk? I can raise my hand. Exactly. They are costing us in insurance, damages, healthcare, wildlife, over $50 million a year. And that's extremely conservative number. The issue with this, though, is Wyoming has been a leader. We understand what we need to do to solve this problem. And we understand how to either build a structure under a road, over a road, or to use existing agricultural structures under the road to give wildlife safe passage and therefore protect the vehicle drivers as well. However, it's extremely pricey. Our commission has dedicated $2 million in the last year to wildlife crossings and then challenged others to step up to the plate as well. It's a priority for the department, our commission, and it's also a priority for the governor. The governor has enacted a challenge called 2020 by the end of 2020. And there is a conservation license plate available for your purchase. All funds from this conservation license plate go into developing safe wildlife crossings. I took the liberty of putting about 50 of these brochures out on the table. This tells you what you need to do to apply. And the governor is asking Wyoming Knights to step up to the plate to see if we can't meet 2020 plates purchased by the end of the year. We are at around 1,730 as of yesterday. So we have just under 300 to go. So please consider purchasing one of these license plate for yourself, or maybe a gift for Christmas from somebody that's interested. The crossings that we currently have in the state, some of you probably are familiar with Trappers Point up by Pinedale. We know from our past research that those crossings are 90% effective. So again, we have an identified solution and we'd like to put more of these on the landscape in Wyoming. With that, I'm going to thank you for your time today. And when I call my dad, who's 80 years old and just got done harvesting 2 weeks ago in Southwest Iowa, I'm sure he'll be very proud that I got done talking to a whole room of farmers. So thank you.
Thank you, Angie. On behalf of the Wyoming Farm Bureau, with that,